Right now, you are certain you are choosing to read this. The certainty is immediate, total, and feels like the most self-evident fact available. Of course you are choosing. You are doing it. You can stop at any moment. That very capacity to stop is the proof of the choosing. Free will is not a philosophical abstraction. It is the texture of every moment of conscious experience. It is what it feels like to be alive. And yet the evidence against it is mounting in a way that is increasingly difficult to dismiss. Neuroscientist Benjamin Libet measured something in the 1980s that has never been satisfactorily explained away. The brain's readiness potential, the neural activity that precedes a voluntary movement, begins up to 550 milliseconds before the person reports any conscious intention to move. The decision at the neural level precedes the awareness of deciding. By the time you experience the choice has already been made, by processes you have no access to, operating below the threshold of your awareness. If the neural activity precedes the conscious experience of choosing, what exactly is the consciousness doing? Is it making the decision, or is it being informed of a decision that has already been made and constructing, after the fact, the experience of having made it? This question is not academic. It reaches into everything, into moral responsibility, into the logic of self-improvement, into the meaning of the spiritual path itself. And the answer, or rather the territory that honest investigation of the question opens into, is more interesting than either the comfortable yes or the terrifying no. Part 1. What the science actually shows. The Libet experiment was not an isolated finding. It opened a research program that has continued for 4 decades, and the findings have consistently complicated the intuitive picture of conscious choice. More recent research using brain imaging has identified patterns of neural activity that can predict a person's choice. Left hand or right hand, for instance, up to 10 seconds before the person reports making the decision. 10 seconds. The outcome of the choice is encoded in the brain's activity long before the experience of choosing arrives in consciousness. What this suggests, taken at face value, is deeply uncomfortable. That what we experience as the moment of choice, the felt sense of deliberating, weighing, and selecting, is not the moment the choice is made. It is the moment the choice reaches conscious awareness after being made by prior unconscious processes. The conscious experience of choosing may be, in the most literal sense, a retrospective narrative. A story the mind tells itself about what just happened, a story in which the conscious self is the protagonist, the agent, the one who decided, when the actual determinants of the outcome were operating below the level of any self that could have decided. This does not mean the research is the final word. The Libet experiments have been criticized for the artificiality of the laboratory setting, for the difficulty of precisely timing the onset of conscious intention, for the question of what exactly the readiness potential is measuring. The science is not settled in the way that its most enthusiastic interpreters sometimes suggest, but it is not dismissible either. And it points at something that philosophy and contemplative traditions have been pointing at for much longer than neuroscience. The possibility that the authorship of experience is not where ordinary consciousness locates it. Part 2, the philosophical terrain. The question of free will is not new. It is arguably the oldest question in philosophy. And the positions that have been staked out across millennia of inquiry reveal something important. The question resists resolution, not because it hasn't been thought about carefully enough, but because it sits at the intersection of 2 things that cannot both be true in the simple form each requires. The determinist position holds that every event, including every mental event, every neural firing, every experienced decision, is the necessary consequence of prior causes, stretching back without break to conditions that predate the existence of the choosing self. Given the laws of physics and the initial conditions of the universe, every choice you have ever made or will ever make was already fixed at the moment of the Big Bang. The experience of choosing is real. The choice itself, in any meaningful sense, is not. The libertarian free will position, not the political variety, the philosophical one, holds that something about human consciousness genuinely escapes the causal chain. that there is a level at which genuine, uncaused choosing occurs, that the self is not simply the output of prior processes, but a genuine originator of new causal sequences. Both positions have problems that have never been fully resolved. Determinism makes the experience of choice entirely illusory in a way that strains credulity and appears to undermine the entire project of deliberation and responsibility. Libertarian free will requires the existence of a self that stands outside the causal order. And no one has been able to explain what such a self would be or how it would interact with the physical brain. The most sophisticated contemporary position, Compatibilism, attempts to dissolve the apparent conflict by arguing that free will and determinism are not actually in conflict. That freedom, properly understood, is not the absence of causes, but the presence of the right kind of causes, specifically causes that run through the person's own deliberative processes rather than bypassing them. You are free when you act from your own reasons, values, and deliberations, regardless of whether those reasons, values, and deliberations were themselves causally determined. This is a genuine philosophical contribution. It is also, to many, deeply unsatisfying because it relocates freedom inside the causal chain rather than explaining how genuine authorship is possible within it. Part 3, the contemplative inversion. The contemplative traditions approach this question from a completely different direction, and what they find consistently is not the resolution of the debate, but the dissolution of the premise. The debate about free will assumes a self that either does or does not have freedom. It takes the existence of the choosing self as the unexamined ground and asks whether that self's choices are genuinely free. What the contemplative investigation reveals is that the self doing the choosing is itself not what it appears to be. When the question is turned from, am I free to choose, to what is the I that would be doing the choosing, something unexpected happens. The self that was taken as the obvious starting point, the unquestioned experiencer of choice, begins to become difficult to locate, not as a philosophical conclusion, but as a direct phenomenological finding. The Buddhist traditions describe this as anatta, non-self, not the absence of experience or function, but the absence of a fixed, independent, causally unconditioned self that could be the ultimate originator of choices. What appears upon investigation is not a self that chooses, but a process, arising from conditions, operating through patterns, producing what are experienced as choices without there being a separate chooser standing behind them. This is not the same as saying choices don't happen. It is saying that the authorship of choices is not located where ordinary consciousness insists it is. There is no homunculus behind the eyes, free of causation, deliberating with pure independence and pressing a button. There is a process, exquisitely complex, partly accessible to awareness and partly not, operating across multiple timescales simultaneously, and within that process, something genuinely happens that produces real differences in what occurs. Whether that something deserves the name choice depends entirely on what you require the word to mean. Part 4, what is actually available. If the heroic libertarian version of free will, the uncaused cause, the self outside the causal chain, is not available, what is? More than nothing. Specifically and practically, more than nothing. The first thing that is available is the development of the processes that generate choice. Even within a fully deterministic or compatibilist framework, the processes that produce what are experienced as choices are not fixed. They are plastic. They respond to input. The cultivation of awareness, the integration of shadow material, the recalibration of the nervous system's baseline state, all of these change the processes from which choices emerge. If the choice is determined by the process, and the process can be developed, then the development of the process is the only available version of freedom, and it is a genuinely significant one. The second thing available is the gap between stimulus and response. Viktor Frankl pointed at this. The space between what happens and what follows from it in which something operates that deserves the name of choice, even if its ultimate nature is philosophically contested. The development of awareness specifically expands this gap. The stimulus arrives, the automatic response begins to form, and increasingly, with practice, there is something present that notices the forming before it completes. That noticing is the locus of whatever freedom is actually available. Not freedom from causation, but freedom from pure automaticity. The third thing available is the recognition that the question of free will, which generates, in most people who encounter it seriously, either existential crisis or the dismissal of moral responsibility, is not the question that most matters. What most matters is not whether the choice was ultimately free in some absolute metaphysical sense. It is whether the process producing it can become more conscious, more informed, more aligned with what is actually valued, rather than what is automatically reacted from. Whether the gap between stimulus and response can widen, whether the quality of what generates the choice can deepen. These are available. They are the work, and they are what the question was always actually pointing toward. Not a philosophical verdict, but an invitation to develop the only version of authorship that is genuinely accessible. You may not be choosing in the way you think you are. The neural activity precedes the awareness. The unconscious processes run faster and deeper than the conscious ones. The self that feels like the author of the choice may be, in important ways, a story told after the fact. And yet something is happening, something that is responsive to cultivation, that expands with awareness, that becomes more conscious with practice, that produces genuinely different outcomes depending on the quality of what generates it. That something, whatever its ultimate metaphysical status, is worth developing. Not because developing it guarantees freedom in the absolute sense, but because the alternative, living entirely from automaticity, from unconscious pattern, from the choices that the unexamined process generates without awareness available to catch them, is the only version of unfreedom that is actually certain. The gap between stimulus and response is real. It widens with awareness. And in that gap, however small, however philosophically contested, lives the only version of choosing that has ever been available to any human being, which turns out to be enough, more than enough, to build an entirely different life. If this cracks something open about what it actually means to choose, share it. Someone you know is living entirely from automaticity and calling it free will. This might be the thing that shows them where the real work begins. See you in the next one.